Chapter 9. His wonderful youth seemed never to leave him. When his servant came in, Dorian looked at him carefully. "Does he want to look behind the screen?" The man was quiet and waited for his orders. Dorian lit a cigarette and walked over to the mirror and looked into it. He could see his servant's face perfectly. There was nothing to be afraid of. Yet he thought it best to be on his guard. Speaking very slowly, he told him to tell the housekeeper that he wanted to see her, and then go to the frame maker and ask him to send 2 of his men round at once. It seemed to him that as the man left the room, his eyes moved in the direction of the screen. Or was that just his own fancy? After a few moments, Mrs. Leaf, housekeeper, came into the library. He asked her for the key of the schoolroom. "The old schoolroom, Mr. Dorian?" She was surprised. "Why, it is full of dust. It is not fit for you to see, sir. It is not, indeed." "Oh, I only want the key." "Well, sir, you'll be covered with spider webs if you go into it. Why, it hasn't been opened for nearly 5 years, not since your grandfather died." "That does not matter," he answered. "I simply want to see the place, that is all. Give me the key." "And here is the key, sir," said the old lady. "But you don't think of living up there, sir?" "No, no," he cried. "Thank you, Leaf, that will do." As the door closed behind her, Dorian put the key in his pocket and looked round the room. His eyes fell on a large purple satin cover, a splendid piece of Italian cloth. Now it would hide something worse than the death, something that would breed horrors and yet would never die. His sins would eat away its beauty and make it shameful, and yet the picture would still live on. It would be always alive. He took up from the sofa the great purple and gold cover, and holding it in his hands, looked behind the screen. Did the face change again? It seemed to him that it was unchanged, and yet his hatred of it was intensified. Gold hair, blue eyes, and rose-red lips, they all were there. It was the expression that had changed. His own soul was looking out at him from the picture and calling him to judgment. A look of pain came across him, and he put the cover over it. As he did so, a knock came to the door, and his servant came in. "The persons are here, monsieur." He thought, "I must send him away from home. I don't want him to know where the picture will be taken to." He sat down at the table and wrote a note to Lord Henry, asking him to send him something to read, and reminding him that they were to meet at 8:15 that evening. "Wait for an answer," he said, handing it to him, "and show the men in here." In 2 or 3 minutes there was another knock, and Mr. Hubbard himself, the celebrated frame maker, came in with a young assistant. "What can I do for you, Mr. Gray?" he said, rubbing his fat hands. "I am so sorry you have given yourself the trouble of coming round, Mr. Hubbard. Today I only want a picture carried to the top of the house for me. It is rather heavy, so I thought I would ask you to lend me a couple of your men." "No trouble at all, Mr. Gray. I am delighted to be of any service to you. Which is the work of art, sir?" "This," replied Dorian. "Can you move it covered just as it is? I don't want it to get scratched going upstairs." "There will be no difficulty, sir," said the frame maker. "And now, where shall we carry it to, Mr. Gray?" "I will show you the way, Mr. Hubbard, if you will kindly follow me. Or perhaps you had better go in front. I am afraid it is right at the top of the house." He held the door open for them, and they passed out into the hall and began to go upstairs. "I am afraid it is rather heavy," said Dorian, as he unlocked the door that opened into the room where he was going to keep the curious secret of his life and hide his soul from the eyes of men. He had not entered the place for more than 4 years. Not indeed, since he had used it first as a playroom when he was a child, and then as a study when he grew older. It was a large room, specially built by his grandfather for him. It appeared to Dorian to have but little changed. How well he remembered it all! Every moment of his lonely childhood came back to him as he looked round. It seemed horrible to him that it was here the fatal portrait was to be hidden away. How little he had thought in his childhood of all that was in store for him. But there was no other place in the house so secret. He had the key, and no one else could get there. Beneath its purple cover, the face painted on the canvas could grow dreadful. What did it matter? No one could see it. He himself would not see it. Why should he watch it? He kept his youth. That was enough. And besides, his nature can grow finer after all. There was no reason that the future will be so full of shame. Some love can come across his life and save him from sins. Perhaps someday the cruel look will pass away from the red lips, and he will show to the world Basil Hallward's work. No, that was impossible. Hour by hour, and week by week, the thing on the canvas was growing old. Perhaps it would escape the horror of sin, but the horror of age was in store for it. The cheeks would become lifeless. Yellow crow's feet would appear round his eyes and make them horrible. The hair would lose its brightness. There would be the wrinkled throat, the cold, blue-veined hands, the twisted body. The picture had to be hidden. There was no help for it. "Bring it in, Mr. Hubbard, please," Dorian said, turning round. "I am sorry I kept you so long. I was thinking of something else." "Always glad to have a rest, Mr. Gray," answered the frame-maker. "Where shall we put it, sir?" "Oh, anywhere. Here, this will do. I don't want to have it hung up. Just put it near the wall, thanks." "Can I have one look at the work of art, sir?" "It would not interest you, Mr. Hubbard," Dorian said, keeping his eye on the man. He felt ready to jump upon him if he touched the secret of his life. "I shan't trouble you any more now. Thank you very much." Not at all, Mr. Gray. Ever ready to do anything for you, sir." And Mr. Hubbard went downstairs, followed by the assistant. When the sound of their footsteps had died away, Dorian locked the door and put the key in his pocket. He felt safe now. No one would ever look on the horrible thing. No eye but his would ever see his shame. On reaching the library, he found that it was just after 5 o'clock, and that the tea had been already brought up. On a little table of dark wood was lying a note from Lord Henry, and beside it was a book in yellow paper. There was a newspaper on the table, too. He sighed and opened Lord Henry's note. He sent him the evening paper, and a book that could interest him, and confirmed that he would be at the club at 8:15. He opened the newspaper and looked through it. A red pencil mark caught his eye. Inquest on an actress. An inquest was held this morning by Mr. Danby, the district coroner, on the body of Sybil Vane, a young actress. A verdict of death by misadventure was returned. He tore the paper in two and went across the room. How ugly it all was, and how horribly real ugliness made things. Why did Lord Henry send the newspaper? Did his servant read it? Perhaps he had read it. And yet, what did it matter? What had Dorian Gray to do with Sybil Vane's death? There was nothing to fear. Dorian Gray had not killed her. His eye fell on the yellow book that Lord Henry had sent him. He took the book, sat down in the armchair, and began to turn over the pages. After a few minutes, he became absorbed. It was the strangest book that he had ever read. It seemed to him that the sins of the world were passing before him, It was a novel without a plot, and with only one character. It was a psychological study of a young Parisian who spent his life trying to realize all the passions,